A clarification, that's why I'm asking. It's a response to the presentation. That is, see, we know that, see, probably the epistemological assumption of most of the action research perspective is to work in a collaborative way, to work with the community in the knowledge generation process and also the action. And he also said that, see, we need to actually we are not writing on the community, means on the derivation or property of the community, but we are writing with the community. Actually, my problem is that, see, when we say this, unknowingly it has an implied notion that the community is a very homogeneous entity. And see, when we look at the action research process, we need to start from the identification of a research problem. So that is why I am sharing the concerns of the students also. See, some of the students are struggling with these things. See, for instance, some of them identified the problem with the community, means the participation was there, but some of them couldn't engage in that way and ensure the participation of the community. So, the problem is that, see, I am asking a very pragmatic question, that is how to go about in that context. So the two concerns I have, one is that, see, are we looking at community as a homogeneous entity? Actually, in the real life situation, it is not a homogeneous entity. See, in that context, how do we identify a research question?
Rajesh, actually, I'm not answering your question actually, but just foregrounding one example. Saroj is here. Yeah. From Raigara actually. Nivedita was also there, Professor Menon was there, because in the action research seminar it came up that the village she is in is caste divided, as most villages are. So community is not a homogeneous entity. I think that's the beginning premise. Let us not even go back to that in that sense. And the real problem was faced by Anjali. Because she was with a group that was of certain caste, and that caste group did not want her to engage with the other caste. And when she formulated her problem, action, question and all of that, it was determined by that one part of the village. And some of us that day suggested that take this up itself as a problem of transformation, rather than anguishing about गांव का उस hamlet से मेरा बात नहीं हुआ, rather than that take the non-communication or the non-participation itself as a problem of transformation.
Instead of anguishing that my issue is, I'm interested in this, but because they are not letting me go there, I can't deal with that. So there's an issue there right in front of me. Or social transformation.
Yeah. So that's how that day we had that discussion. And you are absolutely right, it's a real problem for many students, which is what I was discussing with Rick just now, that social transformation without any relationship with political transformation is something that our students are showing is difficult. And maybe we need to dialogue between them. And it cannot be only one way. And self, of course, but I'm not talking of self here, because that's another angle altogether. That you cannot institute the project Aanchal wants to institute without a consideration of the kinds of the question you asked Rukmini Datta, right? Remember that all your funding goes to only one actor, one kind of actor. There are other kinds of actors who also want transformation in the rural. So and students may have to connect with both, and that is what we have to see, whether it's coming in their transformation philosophies.
I would just like to come in for a second, which is that I'm often struck by this distinction. If I look at this group sitting here, aren't we as diverse can be? Yet we are, I think there's some attempt being going on in terms of, some talk about one voice with respect to action research. I mean, how is it that when we go into the field, just because those people are poor or tribal or ABC, we think that they are different from us? You know, fact is they're different, all right. I mean, by various kinds of indicators, they're different, certainly. But in terms of the diversity, in terms of if you and I come from different, different perspectives, so our take on what is actual research will be different. But does that mean that we, how do we evolve that common voice? So that as a community, certainly any community is stratified in various lattices in that sense. I mean, this is something I would very much like the student or any one of us to understand or appreciate, that over there we are not going there because we are different. We are also in our own milieu. We have almost parallel problems. The nature or the intensity of those problems might be different. And I don't think this group, for instance, is any different in a certain sense. I mean, I can straight away think about 5 different dimensions on which all of us are different. So how do we resolve that?
I would like to check my understanding of in this Rayagada situation. How do you understand by the word community? Here, the village, I do not think they are considered as a community, and they did not, Bhavya has not worked with the whole village. She has identified, she has mobilized a group of people having some similar need, characteristics, whatever it is. So that forms the group with whom the person is working with. So in this case, when we are asking whether community is homogeneous or heterogeneous, in my mind, when a group is being formed, one person is working with a group, there is at least one similarity. For example, when we form self-help group, we know that there is 2 similarities. One is people, 2-3 similarities, and they belong to same village or hamlet, and they are women. So these are 1 or 2 similarities based upon which the person gets engaged with. Similarly, in the Bhavya case, they are single women, they might be facing similar kind of the situations, and so in that sense, community, I would rather use a group with whom a person is get engaged with. That's how I am understanding. And I get connected with your word when you told that action research in collaboration. In this case, a person, the outsider, is in collaboration with that group of people.
In that sense, Ajay, you are suggesting that communities can be given communities and forged communities.
Yeah, it's a group
Forge
of
a
people
community.
who can, with some effort, who can come together. Like here, this group of people are interested to understand action research, and somebody can collaborate with us to develop what is action research, and so in that sense, there is a common willingness. Either they are aware earlier, they have in their mind earlier, or some process one is able to arouse that need of communication.
So, are we just looking at community groups and then target population that have had the common ground to come together, or that is the target of social transformation, so to speak?
Well, in the contained space, it would be the particular issue that, for instance, the single women there. So it's a very large, there are people, they're not yet a group, but there are people who have the same set of issues they would like to act upon. So for this limited purpose, in the contained space that we are creating, in a sense we are circumscribing a contained space for the student to have a small experience, a time-bound contained experience. So some particular, when people come together, this is what I've also been thinking, that when people come together around that particular issue, that there's dissatisfaction, there's a difference between what they want and what is, and they're ready to act on it, that group of people is the one with whom I'm going to ideally engage.
But do we see it as a social group, and that's where we place the analysis at, or do we see it as community?
What we call it, I'm not sure, but it is
In this
a
case,
set of people with a shared set of issues, addressing it, to be willing to come together to address it, to work together to investigate it. That's
So
what
our,
we call it, I don't know.
so our I don't know any word of action research. So it's as stupid as it can be. So what we're doing basically is working on social transformation based on issue areas.
Some problems, or a particular
Issue
social
area.
problem,
Social problem, what the
particular
community
problem that is.
a particular problem, a
Yeah.
particular situation that the community feels is problematic and has a problem, right?
And a community may be born out of that.
Yeah, the community may be born out of
They may
it.
not feel it, but
Maybe a
why we
political
think it, then the problematic becomes to help them to reflect, to question their structure. I mean, there we can have different variations.
No, I personally feel that I think it's a question of strategic thinking, because you have a very complex reality to deal with, and you have a certain conception of, and that may not be the correct conception. There will be many conceptions, but we have a conception. Not all of us share that conception, but each one of us have got a worldview and a conception about what that transformation would be. And willy-nilly, I think there seems to be, for want of a better word, a consensus on some of those issues. And then, there is always a strategic thinking, because where do we intervene? How do we intervene? Through whom do we intervene? That for the very idea that Pradhan and the social transformation process that Pradhan has initiated itself has a certain architecture and a design, and self-help group becomes an instrument through that. Why self-help group? Why can't it be some other way? Why can't it be why women? Why can't it be youth? I mean, you could well have thought about different ways in which, I think, in fact, ML had it was educated youth that they were basically to begin with to focusing. So here women are focused. So these are all, I would look at it as strategic. So although the transformative process and the canvas that it presents is too huge, but there is always a strategic way of entering there, and that's very important. Even for Pradhan's own intervention strategies. Within that, we are having a training program, and you are actually exposing a trainee practitioner into a situation like that. I think there is further delimitation of the way in which she would intervene or engage. That needs to be done. Otherwise, it will be like it has. Then it can't be contained within frames and stuff like that. But a formal instructional program, whether we like it or not, has got certain frames. We may not like the frame. Here, let us put it this way: we have a larger stake of social transformation. Even if that we do not have a shared perspective, we all have more or less, intuitively, we can say that we have a certain idea of social transformation, which has got a lot of interface with it. I would even go to the extent of saying Ambedkar University Delhi or Pradhan is one of the ways, one of the many ways in which we have to intervene. We could have thought about other ways of doing it, but this is one such. So Ambedkar University of Delhi has got its own strategy, its own conception, its own structure. Pradhan has its own structures. So I think it's a one among many possibilities of getting into it. I would put it that way. So if social group is a better, more accurate way of presenting the people with whom we work, I think social group, be that.
Anything that
Yeah, because
So community is a larger thing, it's much more heterogeneous, whereas social group is much more, it's a shared perspective is there in it. It's like there is a certain mobilization which goes behind taking a social group out of it, etc. And the social group becomes a nucleus for going through a cognitive process on behalf of the entire community, and also in due course they will be the ones who would be the agents of change within the community, something of this kind. So social group perhaps.
No, my concern, see, maybe this is a hypothetical imagination. See, what is my concern is, see, anyway, students are going to the village. And village is a social space. So, can we imagine that a common space construct in the village where all kinds of issues confront with each other and come up with a research question?
Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I'm
But
asking.
ecological, gender, political, class, caste, religious, other kinds of prejudices, everything manifesting is that a possibility?
See, that's why that is also my concerns. Can we imagine? Just imaginations. I'm asking. I'm saying that this maybe it's a hypothetical imagination.
I think you need, what Shyam was saying is, see, to initiate action or to generate knowledge or any movement of any kind, any space, there has to be something you hold on to, something some sort of a hook, for want of a better word. So in that sense, the fact that we are all women, or we are all educated people, or we are all youth, or we are all single, or we are all tribe, or what have you, that could be one starting point. Now, in the life of in my long engagement, I'm not restricted by where I begin. In fact, in practice, you see that. If you look at Pradhan's work, or any other practitioner's work, you will find that a lot of what's going on in the field is actually these multiple spaces get connected. One space triggers another and another and another. So a lot of issues, the kinds of things that somebody was mentioning Sarbani doing, I don't know what she did, but somebody has said that occasionally I hear stories about how women dealt with issues of dowry. Said that it was not built around dealing with the issue of dowry, but the trigger of forming a group for women to get together, sort of gradually began to impinge on, so in a way it's a spiral which happens. In fact, that's the way I think of change itself. That it's not it's not from here to here, but it's actually you're moving in a spiral. Hopefully, the spiral is taking you upwards in terms of being more evolved and so on and so forth. But the beginning, often, at least in my experience, is usually one little thing somewhere, and that little stop would be they are all women, or they are all single, or they are all deserted women, or they are all farmers, or
There's a drought.
or there is a drought, or there is a crisis, or whatever. So that I think that's the problem arises when we begin to get kind of caught up in the complexity. How do you resolve complexity? You can't resolve complexity by dealing with complexity. You've got to start to unravel. So you will unravel someplace, and that someplace would be any particular social identity that I can that's kind of readily available. This idea of these guys have been working there for donkey's years, and the fact that in the village a very large population of women are single women, and their concerns are, will I die under a tree? That's so that I'm hungry or this, that is not their concern. The concern is, one single woman was found dead under a tree. So will that be my fate? That's an anxiety that they have, which is so you then that being single, and therefore what future holds for me, might hold for me, becomes an issue which brings them together. Actually the caste and age and all these might actually dissolve. They might be all single women who belong to different castes or different tribes or whatever, but that might actually dissolve for that particular moment. Doesn't mean that it disappears. Over a period of time, maybe once they get together, the other issues of caste or other differences that exist will also surface and will be dealt with. So I think that's the way I look at. And that's been my experience of what I see happening in the field. That a lot of most people begin around some trigger, and then that leads to a kind of a spiral of change, which will encompass many other directions. That's the way I look at it.
We wanted a reflection, and Dipankar has suggested one way of going about it. Let us see if we all agree with it. He was suggesting that, given the pre-lunch discussion we had of many kinds, putting it in context, differing on some questions also, as is also happening now, can we have a round of reflection on what is what is my we framed it very clearly. What is my understanding of action research, given the kinds of discussions and what I already had, my experiences in the field with the students, and the push and pull that happened in the first two immersions. Where am I in my understanding of action research? Also because some of us will be supervisors, nearly all of us in this room. So, what is it that I would think? So, a quick round of reflection, and in that, as Rukmini suggested before lunch, that some of you have prepared a note, can come in with the note also and see. This is how I have. Right, Rukmini? Yeah. So, where should we begin is the question. That is never the question. Start here, Rukmini. Start.
We should begin with the multiplicity of voices.
So I think we should begin
Everybody's take on what they think is action research,
during the discussion.
and then we can come together.
Yeah, so start from the field. I guess.
Yes.
We all agree, right?
We should hear the field.
Start from the field.
Field in the class. It's like our God through his life skills. So I stopped using
Shubhakantu. Dipankar. Vinod.
our own fields.
Dipankar, the chosen one is you, Vinod. Start with you.
What is action research?
It's based out to answer, make sense of an answer to action research. Basically, I feel what is action research, more than what is action research. I see that as a subject who enters the field have different sets of complexities that one carry with as one enters. For his own class, caste, gender, in how he is able to locate, to examine among the set of agendas that he would want to take as a researchable idea itself, a difficult terrain to navigate. And then to relate to the heterogeneous group in which sometimes the minority opinion may be as strong as the majority opinion. In the sense that, I don't know, I hear about self-help groups. I was wondering if there were men self-help groups in the villages who are also burdened of patriarchy, who also experience life differently. So there can be so you can, I don't know, maybe, how does one make sense of the question? And before, there are different possibilities that you can also trigger. I mean, one in which you engage in research where the fault lines wanted to be worked with, and that can also lead to a lot of violence for the researcher. I mean, when he is engaging with a difficult question, thinking that this is a question worth exploring, but the community and culture that. So that is one. The second thing, I think, more like a cultural question. you come with your set of being and your biases, and you are trying to make sense of another community, which in their set of beliefs and biases and structures they hold. There are different people who are drawing benefits. Some are marginalized, some are very much within the part of that. There again is a hue. But within your research question, you will temper it with one particular position. You will temper it with your ethics, you will temper it with your judgment, you will temper it with... So to me, I don't know, to me action research would be therefore seeing limits of that engagement. I'm not able to see in a very clear way that this would certainly therefore bring a transformation. So it's also, I think it's your difficulties in the field, and as you make sense of it, that will give some sense of legitimate knowledge. That's how I feel. So I don't know what would action then stand for, because action to me does not account for, seems to have a very neat boundary and inside and outside, a notion of finite time, a notion of some few things are there, foregrounded to that. And that I am not sure about. How to make sense of it. So whether one can intervene when Rajesh posed a question, I mean, if it is a heterogeneous group and if the angularities are drawn at very first day, I mean the angularities might stay. It depends on my maturity or my social location as to how do I be in a position to handle it. So it requires some amount of trust for certain issues of action to emerge, and especially if your research question is on around certain fault lines where you think a new epistemology has to be envisaged, then it is extremely difficult for a student to come up with one question, because he will feel scattered with
Which is
his
happening.
question transforming itself in so many ways, like how caste sort of sophisticatedly in an urban setup sort of take other forms, and we are extremely polite about it. And therefore we may not be wanting to talk harder. But there can be that, and as a student, so there are those many scatters of things. So we may use the word action, but so I don't know, that action seems to be may end up in a pause. So make sense of the research for me through action research requires that though there's some finiteness that even the guide should be able to say इतना कर पाएंगे, कर सकते हैं कुछ issues, क्योंकि इसमें एक्शन का अगर एक सेंस है कि there's a clear end, then action has a very different meaning. When it is not a clear end, and I don't know, I mean the deaf track students, if the visualization is more attuned to an ideal world or working with sensitivity, which is a little open end. So all the other, so I don't know. I mean, if there's something finite, and that was a question I wanted to ask to Anup after his presentation. What is the role of this suspended judgment for an action? जैसे action हम करते हैं, दिखता है, होता है, उससे एक बहुत अच्छा सेंस भी फील होता है. लेकिन रिफ्लेक्शन में वो पता नहीं होता है कि नहीं, वो जाएगा भी नहीं. And one thinks one has done the job, but one knows it has not reached anywhere. इतनी self doubt में भी जीते हैं और खुल के narcissistically जी भी सकते हैं, मेरे वजह से ऐसा हुआ, ऐसे भी नहीं कह सकते. So there is something invisible and there is something not finite, and there is something which is not time bound in the reflection part. But in the action part, it's just there. And so sometimes that was a question that I wanted to ask you. Like, so in development practice, when the action is out there and it is so visible, and suppose you as a reflective practitioner is saying, I want to be a little more reflexive about it, I want to be a little more detached about it. There's a clear hegemony of action that also keeps reflection at bay. There is a tension, there's a clear tension there, and in action you can have different ways to fight it, but in reflection I don't know. There are different ways to fight. I mean, make sense of it. So for me, so I'm not. So maybe the word action itself is I'm not able to make so clear sense. I don't know if I've answered.
You know, one line Professor Menon has used number of times, and we have also started using it in the action research seminar that we run with the students, where we discuss their proposals, is reflection on the process of transformation. We actually don't. Action research is a phrase we have inherited actually, you know, from elsewhere. But when we are talking of it, we are not talking of action, which is directed, something like that. But transformation, which is a little wobbly. So, in that sense, reflection on the process of transformation, or process of attempted transformation, or process of failed transformation. Would that help you? I'm just wondering. Rick, you want to add? Okay. Maybe we can come back. Have a round. Which way? Sharvani may require a little time, right? You don't want to come in straight away. Take your time.
What I understand by action research is that I think it's your word that it's research with community rather than research on community. So here I believe that community is not only a subject of research, but they are a stakeholder in that the whole action process. And also here the researcher is intervener as well as the researcher also. So I found it as it is a systematically done reflective action basically, where the person, the intervener, is systematically recording the processes, the interventions, and its outcome of the interventions, recording it, systematically analyzing it, and then generating a wisdom, a piece of knowledge out of that whole process. So that's, I think, what I understand what I
Yeah, actually I also resonated when you said the writing, like this transformation and taking knowledge to this research. So that was quite, we are talking about concepts of clarity, so I need clarity to me as to how the process of transformation is building a knowledge. So the research is trying to build that knowledge through this action.
Actually, I was also, while I was discussing with Himani and Nishant and China about their topic, I was somewhere, there was a feeling that if I could have done this action research rather than a research only, it's a better way of actually for a development practitioner from that perspective to understand the process, the transformation process we are triggering, and to keep an eye from a distance also, and then again going there and then doing some intervening there, keeping a record, dialogue, internal dialogue as well as interaction with the community and also the faculty. So it's a very, I think, very interactive process, generating a wisdom at different levels.
मेरे हिसाब से एक्शन रिसर्च का जो अभी तक शेयरिंग हो रहा था, तो मेरा भी वही थॉट है कि कोई अगर कम्युनिटी के साथ एट पार होके और मतलब उसका जो नीड है, फीलिंग द सेम नीड एट पार, वो पोजीशन में जाना थोड़ा सा दिक्कत है। नहीं तो क्या हो ना, मतलब हम पास्ट एक्सपीरियंस से बोल रहे हैं, विजेंदर जैसे कि मेरे साथ है, तो ही वांट्स टू वर्क ऑन सैनिटेशन, तो उसका कुछ प्रीकॉन्सीव नोशन है कि ये चीज़ सैनिटेशन में गांव में होना चाहिए। तो मतलब एक्सटर्नल रिसर्च में अगर वो जानने का कोशिश नहीं करेगा कि सैनिटेशन वो जो सोच रहा है और दिल्ली लोगों का या गाँव वाला का वो सोच है कि नहीं, तो ये डिफरेंस को मीट करना बहुत जरूरी है। तो अगर ये थर्ड स्टेज में जाके हम लोग कुछ ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म क्रिएट कर पाए जो कि उस लेवल पे वो जाए और वो अपने हिसाब से नहीं गांव वालों के हिसाब से सोचे और उसके बाद अगर कुछ एक्शन या नॉलेज गैदर हो रहा है दोनों तरफ तो उसको वो अपना रिसर्च में लाए।
Can I table one question over here which has actually come up in our action research seminar, raised by the students only, and Nivedita and Prasman helped me also to read it. They asked a question very sharply, that what if the community is wrong? Say for example, Bhavya's example, the tribal community she was discussing, and community is fractured and all of that, but that one part of the community wants to carry on polygamy और पाप पानी एक concept invoke करते हैं, the wife already gives a पाप पानी to the man, so पाप पानी में धो गए or something like that. They, Saroja and all try to make us understand, we didn't fully understand that something like that, and the second wife comes in there, and the what is happening, the first wife is not getting property, and that is also leading to the single woman in the rural, that whole problem. That's how in the, so what was observed over there, that a total, and Professor Menon put it very well that day, that on the one hand imposing our agenda on the community and total prostration before the community, कि community जो बोलेंगे वो मान लेंगे, इसमें एक balance भी ना, there is a tension between these two, and the students raise this question, that can I simply go by what the community thinks?
Anthropology, Rosaldo makes a very useful distinction between ethical and cultural relativism, which may be helpful.
Share a little bit, share the idea. We actually try to teach them Rosaldo also.
Like one can be relativist in terms of cultural affairs, but that does not necessarily have to degenerate into an ethical relativism where one cannot have a sense of right or wrong. This is something that Rosaldo develops after his culture and truth work. So, can the anthropologist ever separate the two? Is it useful to separate the two, and what kind of problems can be avoided if one at least notionally makes that kind of a separation? Because anthropology, ethnography, ethnographers often get entangled in this problem of ethical relativism. To not be able to, as if participate in a global dialogue on rights or wrong, as if such a dialogue itself is rendered impossible
because I'm in the community,
by the very project of anthropology, which participates in the community, which lives, which has ethnographers live in, learn the language of the community, etc. As if the whole possibility of a dialogue on rights and wrongs is rendered
redundant because I'm in the community.
Yes. Why to expect that they cannot be wrong? Because they are also human beings. They are not.
And a social group that can go wrong.
They can be wrong or right. They can be wrong or right. That's I don't think that we have to keep them at a high pedestal. That whatever they are.
No, some students had the sense कि हमको community का अंतर का श्वास सुनना पड़ेगा. So they got a little.
I have a
perhaps this also
being sensitive and accepting everything on face value. Both are two different things. So having a healthy debate with them and adult conversation, what's wrong in that?
I think we need to have a little clarity on that among us in the fields also, because sometimes they have heard community का सुनो, sometimes they had heard नहीं अपना भी सुनो थोड़ा सा, like
because anthropologists have also historically been complicit with the agenda of colonialism. So that is where it comes from.
You have a critical relation you need with that.
And look at the example
Yes,
that you
please.
said. So the first group of wives who are deserted and who then. So in their understanding of what's happening to them, would they also be as, would they also think of polygamy as right? Like, so you would find resonances of your own thought, and like if you talk to them as wrong. I have a problem with right and wrong there. I'm not even with even getting away from ethical relativism and all of that. I think we have to be more wary of of imposing our rights as powerful people.
It's not about imposing our right. It's about the possibility of a dialogue.
An ethical
I think
question.
we have to be more wary
There's
of
postmodernism.
imposing right than to be relativist is what I'm saying. But anyways, we can be wary of both.
No, right and wrong, Mamta, not in that sense, not in the earlier sense. So what happened is important. What the students and Saroj did actually, they forged again social group or political community, whichever we want to call them, with the women who were having some discomfort, if not a critique of that kind, and have started a social movement actually.
But I thought we had a discussion, and this morning's discussion also reinforces that for any community could be right or wrong, right? In whatever
We
way.
can also be wrong as a community.
Sure. That's what we were discussing in the morning, consensus and clarity and all this stuff.
Professional concept.
And the role of critical reflection, whether it's for us, whether it's in the community, whether it's in the dialogue,
Okay.
that is, I think, central to the whole process. Behind that question of what is right and wrong, I think there's another question that I perceive that this community that this is a problem, but the community is not perceiving it as a problem.
That's another issue.
Now, how would I place my question? So, would I place my question as one of if I am to stimulate critical reflection on this set of issues with the community, what would it take for the community to critically reflect on it? Is it a so-called successful enterprise or not? Does the community really, that process itself could then be one way of looking at the question. Another way is to step back and say, okay, it's an either-or way of looking at it. It's them or me. So that construct of critical reflection as a process. So the underlying thought which came in the morning also is what we've been discussing. It's not product. Actually, it's not a product in that sense. It's a process. So if we look at it from a process point of view, then many more possibilities open up than getting hung up on the products. And that's what I think is, I don't know right or wrong.
I agree, it's action research may be a process, but when we say action research on transformation, it's a huge word, and intervention in 6 months, 1 year, we can expect a change.
Right.
Sure. And so it may be, it may have transformation effect after 3 years, 5 years, for sure. Can we say action research on transformation?
We can say to initiate a process.
Actually, change, I think more comfortable with the word change process or whatever, which is hopefully towards transformation. The change is, the idea is that it should lead to transformation. That's how you end up, moving up the spiral. So, beginning it may actually look quite insignificant movement, but eventually, if it takes that track, hopefully it will lead to transformation. So,
Shifa, Rukmini, Imran.
Thinking about whether the ethical is in fact in listening to the community, or rather that you're observing something that hasn't even become a question for the community.
Possible.
And then from there trying to say that in the process, how can I engage with the community to even show why is this an important question? That's the point.
This is one position we were highlighting with the students.
So then the project can also be, only this much in the students' work.
In fact, Shifa, you have put a point very well. This this question, single woman in rural setting, was not even a question.
Yeah.
So it's Saroj and Bhavya and a few others over there, I should not take only two names, who have inserted this as a question. And they have taken a first step to form a group which will take up this question. And that's all they have done till now. Okay, but that's an interesting change, as Deep is saying. And one can even just document that change in the next 6 months, that what is to form a group of single, abundant, destitute women in rural India, deeply entrenched in patriarchy, class hierarchies, caste hierarchies and all that, where there's possibility of violence on these groups. We'll just start asking for say land rights. So that itself, you have put it very well, and it was coming up again, Nivedita and Prozaman, and in our discussions with the students, it was coming up. How to go about it.
See, Anchal's village, caste, she, see, Anchal in Raigada, and she works with with women in a particular hamlet, or in her group, she finds that women from a particular hamlet is excluded, and then that she considers as a major problem, because and this happens to be a Dalit hamlet, and there is a voluntary as well as a sort of an exclusion, deliberate exclusion, and then she wants to sort of, she is asking this question: is it correct on my part to be with this group at all? Shouldn't I be working with them instead? And she's also trying to sort of create some overtures between the two. So there is a certain change that is happening. But the word change is, of course, as Deep said, it's probably more modest. But the thing is, change is a value neutral word, I think, and it could be one way or the other. Salwa Judum created changes in Chhattisgarh. So that also we must remember that. So transformation, it's not as though transformation has to be of a certain dimension, then only it can be called transformation. The thing is transformation, provided we may define it that way. It's at least there's some kind of a desirability that is there according to an ideological position, and then that, and it is also in some sense strategically created, so that those kinds of after all, this word has been used by Karl Marx in this more structural transformation. So I think these are etymological, in my opinion, problems, but it's important for us to sort of create our own vocabulary of what we mean and what we do not mean. But one doesn't have to feel that since we can't attempt the complete cycle of change, there's no point in attempting this at all. That, in my opinion, is probably not correct. But even if one has moved the first step in about 1,000 steps that need to be made, even that is a close to transformation. And if you can document that properly, I think that's a job well done.
Rukmini, Imran, Saroj.
This is sharing the answer to the question, to the original question.
It's now gone in another track. Yeah.
Keep repeating the action research.
Yes, still in that only. In my opinion. We are also asking questions about what is transformation, what are we documenting.
I'll actually take from Bhavya's question on singlehood, single women farmers, as we were discussing, Bhavya and I, and kind of connecting to something that you said, that is my question also the community's question, and the way I construct or understand singlehood, is it the same way in which the community is also constructing or understanding singlehood? So I guess
to go back now to the note that Rajesh had circulated to some of us, one of the questions that was there is what is action, what is research, and can there be, can you really talk about the two, an interface between action and research? And I'm trying to use Bhavya's example of Bhavya's research question on singlehood to try and address this, and also connecting it with Onup's writing, W-R-I-T-I-N-G first and then R-I-G-H-T-I-N-G, writing on writing, and kind of see. So when, I would actually think that when we are talking about action research, the action lies both in the writing of the research as well as in the writing of whatever we are saying. The reason why I'm thinking that there is an action in the writing is because if our end result is to create some kind of a knowledge, because that is what we are continuously talking about, generating knowledge, I think one of the things that we also need to learn in this entire process is how are dissertations written. And dissertations for say MPhil sociology or MPhil politics or MPhil I don't know what has had a particular language in which it is written. And here when we are actually talking about working with the community, where we are, to use feminist research methodological insights of breaking the boundaries between the researcher and the researched, then the way we are writing and so it is just not creating a knowledge, but also how is it that we are writing to create that knowledge. Okay. And I would think that also is a process that we need to kind of learn by itself.
The thing is that there again, I would tend to think that we need to create new idioms.
Yes, absolutely.
And new ways of writing.
Yes.
Because we also feel deeply dissatisfied with the way in which academic writing happens.
Correct.
And
yes.
So, for instance, if it is indeed a participatory nature, and if it is indeed researching with and not researching on, as Anup said, then writing about the transformative process, the writing of the writing process, has in some sense also to encapsulate the meaning that it in an ethnographic sense, in the meaning that the group with whom you are working, they themselves make of the transformative process. So what's important is not this objective knowledge which we carry home from there, but it is actually the experiential, the knowledge which each of those people who have participated in that process carry, the meaning that they carry, in a truly ethnomethodological sense.
Absolutely. But which in fact, sir, connects to what is singlehood. We might, from the location that we belong to, have a particular understanding of single woman, which may not be the lived experience of the woman that one we are working with.
Absolutely, but we need to probably document this dialogue.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Then while documenting the dialogue, we also need to understand. For instance, if 50 years ago this was to be done, today what we consider as this ethical relativism of Rosaldo's thing is somewhat problematic for the following reason. If suppose it had happened 50 years ago, and we would have probably not accepted as we would not have probably under the ethical relativism, which is not permissible, we would not have probably accepted gay relationships. Today probably we have a different view on that. So this ethical relativism also is an evolving framework. You see, that what is ethical today, the whole thing about ethics, there is nothing cast in stone on ethics itself. There is also a changing part of that. So if we have to document this whole process of this dialogical process of single women, for instance, I think it's important for us to document where we began. Deconstructing the very assumptions of our stance in the sense here the researcher's stance, the MPhil student's stance, and also the stance of the group who are participating in this process. their stance, and then trace the way in which it is going to evolve, and if there is a congruence that's going to happen, or there's a divergence, or there's an explosion that's going to happen, whatever, I think it's important for us to document that. But that is difficult, because particularly deconstructing our own assumptions is the most difficult thing, no? Because we have that, unless we are ready to do that, then that equality we will not be able to establish. Then ours will always be a privileged kind of position. I don't know. This is how I would look at it.
Thank you.
Hey. No.
Rosaldo.
Oh, you want? No, not on Rosaldo. Rosaldo was just an example of how in a certain discipline a problem occurs for the first time, and an attempt to resolve that problem by someone pointing out that two things that had been till then considered fused, if notionally separated, can actually yield, strategically speaking, for that moment, very, very practicable consequences. That Rosaldo has now been forgotten, or has left Rosaldo behind. It's of course part of the canon of any discipline. But my larger problem is, if it is about document, then how does it become different from anthropology?
No, it is not. I would tend to think we are standing on the shoulders of,
for instance,
anthropology and other disciplines in that sense. Whatever we are doing,
which is where the methodology course is also going a little that way.
In fact, anthropology, in my opinion, lends itself to this kind of an approach much better than many others.
Then why call it action research and not ethnography?
Not only ethnography.
It is not only ethnography, because in fact,
it is an ethnography of transformation.
I have the same question that Rick has.
But you know,
I just
in my understanding of ethnography, and I mean, that's the old understanding of ethnography, which still maintains a certain kind of distance. And there are ethnographers, and there is, for instance, Andre Bette, who continues to talk even today of a certain value neutrality, coming from the Weberian paradigm, right? So, Bette would perhaps take a slightly different tack from the contemporary ethnographers, who I think with all their soul participates in the process of change and not transformation, actually. So there they see themselves as complicit in and as the subtext of that change.
But we are not complicit, Narik.
Better the research is the catalyst.
Yeah. Here it's not complicit. It's not a passive immersion, Narik.
No.
It's a critical immersion.
Critical immersion, but it's also, I think, I get in there primarily as someone who wants to engage in action, who wants to trigger change or transformation, whatever you want to call it. And for practitioners sitting around here, that is the stance they have. And if you are developing a discipline, the objective we have is that we would, the people who get out of the discipline would see themselves as engaging in action. Hopefully, they will not be sort of fumblers who will sort of go jumping around wherever they can, but they would also be reflective practitioners. That is in some way the difference. That they would not sort of stop building knowledge and contributing to knowledge and learning themselves, but they would actually, that's the direction in which we are hoping to move, that we would create a discipline where unlike the old school doctors, they would sort of keep the boundaries of the discipline itself would keep moving as to what is right, what is wrong, how it is done, how it is not done, what works, what doesn't work, whatever questions one might have. I think that might be, and I have no understanding of ethnography, but my, from the limited conversation here, my sense is that an ethnographer, even when she is complicit, it's by chance that she ended up being complicit. Whereas here, by design, I am actually in the business of, my sense of calling is that of,
catalyzing.
Yeah, catalyzing catalyst. And so that's what
And we'll end up with just one line.
I'll say this much. Because I cannot also make any grand claims on the basis on for an entire discipline, right? So I don't think an ethnographer is ever not complicit in change. I don't think an ethnographer is ever not a catalyst of change. I don't think today in anthropology that position. I mean, there is a strong group, subgroup perhaps within anthropology that argues that this has never been the case, and even when you thought you were not complicit in change, you were.
You were.
And the history of anthropology is the history of realizing your complicity in change, beginning, of course, with the colonial. Right?
Yes.
So I think, but here the stress on the fact that there is a design for change, that perhaps makes it different.
And I'll add one line to that. That while that passive complicity was retrospectively shown, in colonialism you were complicit. Here the complicity and is always put to examination. So here, which is why that whole critical reflection angle is needed, that the complicity needs to be always, pushed to the limit. That where am I complicit? How far am I complicit? Or will I not remain complicit for a moment? That could be one. I'm thinking, as you raised the question, I'm thinking actually, it was not there in my mind. Because we also were saying description in much of our discussion. But now, actually yesterday night it arrived to me that no, it's not description, because it's not passive complicity. There's a critical edge to that. The third point would be that from this we will perhaps have a theory of action, a theory of change. That's a dream. That it will not be a description of action of change or transformation, but we will emerge slowly, that we will do action only or change only, but now we as if have, it's not that others don't have a theory of action, I'm not saying that, but now we will as if have a corpus, a body of knowledge which will be on the theory of transformation. So maybe
that is what I was actually listening to the conversation here. That is what was actually in some ways, that's the kind of question now. How do we,
when you ask that question,
how do we build that theory and how do you build that corpus of knowledge? And that's, see, in some ways, that to my mind is that the, action and writing about action, writing on action, whatever, that's one level. But from there to kind of convert it into into knowledge, in a body of knowledge, I think that's the part which is in some ways challenging, right?
And missing in our thinking
I don't have
till now.
I don't have any.
We don't have a clear idea of how to go about it. Just like psychological knowledge happens through case histories, means encounter with women patients in Freud's clinic in Vienna. So the first is the relationship with the woman patients, then some reflection on their patienthood, their experiences, their past histories, their journeys, and then he comes up with, well, maybe it is this. And psychoanalytic knowledge then takes, at least in Freud's hands, about 55 years to take some shape. So if that is, how would we reach there? Is a difficult question, and it's not easy actually to make that transition. And we know the many landmines in Freud's journey. Many times it got bursted, the theory. So in that sense, from 1895 to 1939, there is a very long journey between the experience levels, short-term, medium-level theorizations that are happening, studies in hysteria, but it's a very medium-level theorization actually. You haven't gone there yet. So it's only 1915 he'll go and say unconscious. So it's taking about 20 years for him to reach there. So we still don't have that. We will have to work hard, and we are also faced with a new organism. I'm getting a feel. This whole immersion, action, research, critical complicity, if that is the new term we coined for ourselves. This is a new organism. It's a new experience for us also. A new experience for Pradhan also actually. So in that sense, what discipline, what disciplinary formation, what knowledge, which may not be called discipline, also in the classical sense, we clearly don't know yet. And an analogous example I was giving the other day to my psychiatrist friends is that I was saying that while hysteria gave birth to psychoanalysis, autism perhaps will give birth to a new science in the 21st century. And that is the new puzzle before us in mental health science. So like that, we are also faced with a new puzzle whose all its trees forget branches and roots. Trees भी ठीक से दिखाई नहीं दे अभी, and पता नहीं like what will be the body of knowledge.
What I perceive with this student engagement, there was I believe that there should be a blankness. Actually, blankness with the term itself, it should be absolutely blankness when we are the student, or we are also practitioners when we deal with community. They have some conceptual knowledge. Now when the meeting happens with the villages, with the community, this lack of blankness, and also with that lack of connectivity with the immediate environment. What happened here is that now Bhavya has whatever she had done because of her connectivity with the family which she is living with. Now she identified that even though Pradhan Raigada team is into gender equity program, we again, and she is a student of gender studies, so she could have been involved with all those gender trainings what we are giving, and she could have been gone to some other way. But the family lady with whom she was living, that touched her. Now from that very beginning, she has actually initiated this. She found that we are working with so many women in the same group. This lady is also in the group, but I don't think that issue of this lady is similar to all the women. So what you are doing in the gender equity program is not going to actually affect this lady, and even if it will not coming directly or in short span, it will take years to come. So we have to actually fragment them and identify them. This is the process of research that she is doing. Now if we look at to the different students, now about Pratip, Anchal, even they are about jumping from this issue to that issue, this issue to that issue, because of initially they started with something they thought it should happen. They came up with an idea, yes, this is the probable thing. And but because of this, whatever they are studying here, they know that we have to actually identify the salt of the community. Unless that happens, wherever you go, you are not going to pursue it. Because of this disturbance, they are struggling, and they are coming, will define against it. Sometimes I thought Pratip is going to this theatre group, he is going to promote the theatre group. Then I am trying to connect him with a local level Kui language tribal theatre group. Suddenly I found that he is shifting his focus on theatre group. He is again to cotton. Now Bhavya, Anchal was doing with health issue of women. Now I thought to link her with CRHP, Arole and model, I thought somewhere she should find these women could unite and develop their own, because health is everyone's need, irrespective of woman, child.
Where Himani is becoming a little successful.
But now I am hearing again she is shifting from this money lenders, cotton cultivation, so whatever, this confusion what they are coming up, because they also want to identify what salt is there with the community and what I am going to, what is salt, this terminology we are using. I am saying that as Gandhi has initiated this. Okay. Salt, it's a common statement of Pradhan right now. Induced by thief.
Share India with Raigada perhaps.
No, I thought I heard salt of the community and then
I heard fault.
Okay. So this is the disturbance. Now again I am seeing this Natasha. The land right she has chosen, it's very prevalent there. But because of this some missing connectivity with that community, she is not able to make. Community is able to make the issue and the group is making. She is not able to make this with the community. That is the only barrier she has to overcome.
Natasha.
Yes, she could overcome within time. So this time. And the second pressure of individuals, we also have some type of this achievement motivation of what I don't know exactly, that what I will do something marvelous, I'll come out in a result will happen, I will be appreciated. This kind of I do, maybe a blockage they have to come up with, because Bhavya don't have that. She is at all not considered, she is not thinking what I will do, what I will be appreciated for, because of maybe that. Neeraj is also not looking, but he is again, now he has came to a conclusion that Narega is not the word. I have opted a different word for that. Though Narega is the answer, but the word should be different. So he is now in that journey again within himself, and he will come out of it. I am saying that this is that research action which is happening. Documenting this will itself give some result. Now about the issue which we are talking then, I was just referring of an African tribe. They have their ritual is of this cutting of clitoris of a 10 to 12 year girl child. And I was just talking with Kamla was then. She said even the tribe never identified it's a problem unless and until they discussed on this. Then this came, and even in this case they know that it's a wrong thing. They might have some terminology which indicates the wrong. For example, this Papa Pani. Papa itself means a sin. They use the term sin for a thing which I was saying that day also. So basically this it itself will evolve, but it needs a blankness which you must have within yourself, and also connection with the immediate environment you are living in. Unless that is the core value, then all these concepts.
That's a huge ask. It's very easy to say.
Yeah,
It's
because-
a blank head. But I've got gender, I've got environment, I've got
Caste.
class, blah blah blah. It's all there. The baggage is there. So how do I get rid of this baggage? That's a great challenge.
This is a
It
question
happened
in the
recently when Shivabrata and Amit, I pushed them for a meeting in my area. And when I was here in Delhi, I said to them to remain silent for 3 hours. And then Shivabrata and Amit told me that Bhayankar experience was, it is impossible because 3 घंटे तुम चुप रहे थे, they deliberately tried it and it evolved. Oh, blankness is not exactly you keep it blank, but you show that you are blank. Maybe.
in the last discussion we had.
And he also suggested, I think it's very difficult, when you are engaging with those families, and that too we are talking about empathetic engagement. It's not only just staying with those families or being with them, and then you are trying to choose or focus on a single issue, because when you are talking to that woman, for that woman, starting from morning to night, everything is a struggle and everything is a challenge for her. And then picking up something, and then you are saying that there should be a joint journey and there has to be something, we need to understand her perspective as well. It's a little difficult because, and this shifting of topic is actually part of that. When you are engaging with that woman and you are actually talking about the migration problem, what this Rashmi actually started with, migration. Because she thought it's the sole problem is migration. If we stop migration, then all these problems are going to solve. And then when she started hearing about violence in the family, so it's related to migration. So she is trying to relate everything to migration now. So one is that it's very difficult to sort out when you are really working so closely with these families, because their life is so much more complex than what we think. So I think
You are right.
that's a big challenge.
That's
for
a real
students
problem,
as
and
well.
students are victims of this
Yeah,
challenge we are putting before them.
That's the same challenge we are also facing. Once you start working on certain issue, then you start thinking, no, it's not actually the gender and patriarchy, but it's beyond that. So
Actually, there is a tension going on. That is, I think they are participating in their life as well as they are observing the life. But see, sometimes this, where is the participant and where is the observer? I think there is a kind of tension is happening between this participation and observation.
an action research in practice? Is it, I mean, you put this woman under pressure when you say you have, I mean, some transformation or change has to happen. But when you say it's a practice, I don't know, because they have to come up with some solution. I mean, I'm trying to be in the shoes of this woman.
Yeah, but I mean, I hope that's not what we are
We need to ask for
suggesting.
solution.
That, you know, even it's attempting a solution or attempting some sort of a change and not being able to get anywhere. That will generate a huge amount of learning and whatever you can reflect on. So I don't think, you know, I hope we're not conveying that they have to.
It's not conveying, but you know, you keep saying action research to them. You have to do action research. They go read literature on action research. They hear what is to be done in action research, and the only perception is like, okay, fine, I have to plan an action that has to be workable. So they're too much into the workable and the action research.
No, exactly that is not happening. Here what I'm saying, they have known their limitations. So on the very first day, with these students actually, I mentioned them that you are not here for a few months later, you are not here. But this problem, whatever issue is, will persist there, and Pradhan team is there. So actually we have owned this, whatever you are doing it there. You may come up with 3 months later, as I was telling yesterday, after May, June I may not be there. But at least for 3 months, I want to focus on that particular village and that particular project. You may expand it to block or district, whatever, because I was saying that I will spread it throughout the Odisha and different districts also through a meeting, and we will do it simultaneously. She was saying I am not going to be involved in that also, because you yourself said that I will may not continue for long. Yes, I will go there I will continue for 5 years, but as far as my action research is concerned, this is my own limitations. And team has actually owned this thing. As far as I am particularly, I am saying that you or Narega or whatever it is, I will do this. But let us together for coming 4 months. Your research will complete like that.
During our action research seminars, I think some of these issues really came automatically. It could well be true that I think we might have at some point communicated that there is a solution, a problem, solving a problem. All these things are involved in action research. But I think we have, I believe, I think we have made some steps forward to remove that. I think the last time, I mean, Vijita and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Last time we were talking clearly in terms of the confluence of. I mean, they thought that the dissertation will be the eventual product of this entire exercise, namely the dissertation will be what may be called in a kind of a monologue kind of a basis, where we will be documenting the confluence of several flows which have happened for a limited period of time. What are the flows? One is the individual researcher herself and her antecedents and her where she comes from and what kinds of ideas she comes from and what kind of change that it goes through this process. Second is the Pradhan itself. Pradhan has got its antecedents and Pradhan is actually getting involved in that area. So Pradhan has its own history and so on. Third and most important is the so-called quote-unquote community. Yeah. So community has its in his history and it's the larger ecosystem in which the community finds itself and so on. So in fact, all the three have got its own ecosystems. And there's an academic ecosystem from these for these candidates. Pradhan has its own ecosystem and so on, and also the community. So we said that as much as possible, it's like a narrative. Where they, as comprehensively as possible, document what happens in this confluence, and that confluence may not lead to any finality or anything like that. It may be the first 3 steps have been made, out of which 2 were failures. I mean, that's. But if we are able to sort of document that in an intellectually honest fashion, in an involved fashion, and also reflecting the meaning that it has, that process have made in the people who have participated, not just the person concerned. Not just them, not just the Pradhan functionaries, but also the community people. I mean, in fact, in the reverse order.
The university also we have
yeah, the university is another.
Some faculty.
So all of them, in a way, that's the way it was envisaged. So it was not really communicated. At least we are trying to sort
we
of.
did not. We tried not
At
to.
least we are trying to sort of go back from that idea that I think now we expect them to create a little revolution there. And otherwise, they will have been considered renegade for the rest of their lives or something like that. That is at least not good.
Like in one word, it is this, that we did push for Pradhan's ownership and the community's ownership of the problem that is co-created.
Yes.
Number one, that we pushed for, which has happened in Raigara Saroj's case over here, maybe because there is some confluence over there, a quicker confluence maybe. The other question, I think we need to clearly share it with the students, that your dissertation will never be evaluated on the efficiency index of transformation or change or action. That is not in any way a measure, which is sometimes a measure for, say, Pradhan, because they have to tell the funder that 46 self-help groups have happened in my state in the last 6 months or 1 year. But the student will never be evaluated on that. I think we need to make that clear.
I have no clue about how they're going to be evaluated.
I have a question.
We can have a discussion on
I
that.
was
Maybe through negation we'll reach there.
Okay.
always
What are the ones we are not evaluating them on? So,
There's also a question like, for instance, if I'm a practitioner, for instance, I'm learning music or I'm painting or whatever, I'm a sculptor. So one is generating knowledge about the process. But to what extent does what I do also count towards that? Is it at all an indicator?
what I do
Whether
with are
I
not in
fail
the
or
sense of
succeed,
deliverables,
Not in terms of an outcome or an output,
but process.
but the processes.
That's all.
So
We
my
cannot put it as how great a painter you are.
No, but the processes. For instance, if I did a particular brush stroke,
Rigor of your practice.
what was my brush stroke? The process. Our focus is not on
What
product.
colors I used, what kind of paint, what kind of brush,
Question in my mind is
relationship,
Yeah. So while
process.
one is the knowledge generation process itself, and that's part of practice itself. But the process itself of, for instance, a simulating change of some kind, or it's only a question. To what extent would we look at it? What are those elements?
I'm getting an idea.
Like the one question we asked in the last seminar, which created a lot of tension amongst the students. It changed the conversation very dramatically by the second hour, when 3 times Professor Menon asked this question. I would like us to reflect on what the intensity of our relationship with the community. How much am I invested
With the group they are
with the
working.
group I'm working with, which is the point. So that is where actually all the issues started coming up. Because those who are invested are sitting, they are feeling okay. But those who are not invested are the ones. So now
Feeling
we know
anxious.
that is a critical dimension. Where there's, and in fact, after the presentation of Bhavya's group and all, they were like, oh God, you raised the standards, now we are in a real mess. That discussion is going on.
Like,
So this is one very critical process. Like that I'm asking.
because the one other thing I'm having is that we may say, as Imran and Rick are asking, what is it that you will evaluate them on? And it is important for the supervisors also to know, because the work has to be presented in June, July. That one could be, and I'm thinking, I'm thinking now as we are speaking, that one could be that there may be a failed transformation. I'm just exaggerating, but a very thick and nuanced documentation and a reflection, which is giving us a very good theory of action or transformation. That see, this way perhaps is not the right way to go, and this way perhaps is one way of attempting. On the other hand, you have a medium level successful transformation, but you haven't managed to really generate something as a body of reflection.
One complexity to that.
Yes,
I
yes.
like
So
it.
maybe
To
I
complement.
would give a better grade if grade is a point at all in this research,
So
or
we
it's
have
just
to-
pass and fail perhaps.
But an
But
X, Y, Z axis.
yeah,
So suppose
yeah,
we add
yeah.
yet another dimension to it. Just idea that what process. So I'm in the village with you, right? Suppose I'm the student, Barsha's and she sees what I'm doing. So there are certain processes that have not been put in place. So it may or may not come up in the documentation, may come up in our dialogue, but you may still not reflect it in what you have written. But I'm observing, for instance, that these processes were not there. For instance, the relationship with the community
Was a little wobbly.
was not.
Yeah.
Since that one has come up and there's general agreement on that. So how would that be taken? Because the process is very important. Not only what I write, because you can write it, that is very important. But also to be aware, because I want to be aware of what I skipped or what I didn't do. If we can look at those, it will add richness.
I just have one question. Is the evaluation happening in-house or it's going out?
None of our evaluations are happening outside. None of us so far. For no programs in AUD except for PhD, the evaluation actually happens outside. But we do get people to come and participate in our Viva Essays. No, we have not even started the Viva Essays.
Actually, the no MPhil program has come up to that point yet.
No, next MA, take MA. You don't get anybody from outside to then completely. Is that good or bad?
Not always
JNU they'll say it's bad.
No, that is like all our exams are
that is Professor Menon.
It's only the distinction and the thesis
that we are complicit in, but not by design.
No, but MPhil, I think
In psychology.
there is an MPhil document which we have, which I think involves the final thesis also involving some externalities.
Yes.
Yeah,
I can share that document
exactly
with
where I
you.
was coming from.
Yeah, there is a rule now.
There is a rule which says that it has to go out. At least there are 3 copies that are to be submitted. One is for the evaluation branch in the university, and one has to go to the external.
External and internal.
Yeah, both.
External means outside the
Outside the unit, outside the teaching staff, like whosoever has taught. So there is a field supervisor and there is an academic.
The university has its own ecosystem. I mean, for instance, this entire this university we have been able to build this university only because we had friends outside the university was trying to support it from outside. They participated in consultative meetings of the curriculum. They participated in faculty selection. They participated as examiners in various, So they are the ones who we. So I don't really visualize that this is going to people who do not understand these things. We'll certainly
send it to people like say Ravi Chopra, who is himself a PhD and a practitioner.
Or Dr.
In the footage,
Shah,
or Mihir Shah, so like that. People who can travel between both sides. That we will have to find interesting examiners for these dissertations if we have to put them out.
Absolutely.
Like maybe
the point that I was raising was because what she's saying about there being a particular process that has to be taken into account. It's not just the writing, it's the process by which the writing was generated that has to be taken into account. That process being evaluated or that coming into the evaluation or reflecting in the evaluation is very difficult.
Puts a burden on the evaluator.
Yes,
No,
and
not
that's
just,
exactly.
No,
that's
not just that, Imran. One thought I'm having is that when field faculty evaluate the process in vivo.
Okay.
The writing is an evaluation in vitro. You finish the process and then you write on it. We only look at the end product. Yeah. Okay. But somebody may evaluate a process in vivo, in the lab, as you are working with a bacteria. Okay, so. No, in biology you may evaluate a lab process.
Then you want to create.
We'll come back to medicine.
I'm thinking that field faculty may evaluate.
The psychologist here something.
And in vivo,
See, I would put it this way. Please let's not consider this as some kind of given and which we can't change. See, if you evolve a system of evaluation which is very unique to yourself, then we'll
get it passed through the research committee. It's not
dissertation's nature can be different from program to program.
And Rukmini was saying writing differently. So in that sense, you will need, the evaluator will need to know what to evaluate.
I'm not particularly worried about that.
It's a question that students ask yesterday. that would be a concern.
No, no, certainly we should.
Yeah. So
understand.
I just wanted to know because I had seen.
Okay, Rukmin, you and Imran now.
So can we call it that this process is methodology? I want to see whether this is something related to methodology or we need to come up with a new methodology by looking at all these processes.
Can we just keep the methodology to be open-ended rather than having a methodology, so to speak, to do that? Let it be whatever tools fits into the.
What are you meaning by methodology?
Rajesh, I think you have to explain to the whole group.
Okay. Methodology.
What do you mean by methodology? You might not be understanding what you are saying.
Before they explain the technical version, I would put it this way from first principles. What are we trying to do? I'm answering the question of what is value. What is being evaluated in such a process, the process and the product both. I would put it this way that I think has the effort been made to work in how intense is the collaboration between the researcher and the group he or she is working with. That I think would be a very important question. How well have the researcher managed to trace the context, the ecosystem and the composition context of the participating, of the partners of this project. Namely, there is a autobiographical element in it, there is a history of Pradhan in it, of the Pradhan's local unit and its concerns and so on, and also the community. So that all those things are how well it is being reflected. I would go to the extent of saying that how lucid and comprehensible is the manner in which the researcher has presented the way in which she went about doing what she did, and that is methodology. What else? And finally, whether there's an attempt to ground whatever experience she got into some kind of explanatory systems, into some theories, and so on. So that that grounded theory approach of a post facto explanatory thing, that has been attempted or not, how well it has been done. I would put this, if we can formulate some 10 questions of this kind, I think we can
should have written it down.
It is against these that I think we should. So it's basically we are telling them, we are convincing in them the idea that this is not a isolated, it's not a activity of a hermit sitting somewhere and waiting for revelation. And when the revelation comes, the hermit can't tell you how they got the revelation. But so that's not what we are obviously asking for. We are asking for how to reach that revelation. So in that sense, it is to make it comprehensible to a community of peers who are involved in a similar exercise. That is the whole rationale of all professional communication. So that's all that I think we are.
That's well put, I think. Remember this.
I think one of the things that I think we probably in evaluation or whatever, we need to probably take on board is that this action research is part of the education process for educating a reflective practitioner in this particular space. Not a reflective practitioner in psychology or psychotherapy or
in development sectors.
So what would I presume the thesis would also kind of convey to us, speak to us whether this person is progressed in that direction or not. So there is action and there is reflection. So it's reflective practice. So what would we expect of a reflective practitioner in terms of how she engages, and how she reflects and records
and produces some theoretical understanding.
I'm speaking a bit abstraction, but I think that is to me would be a guide when we unravel it in bits and parts. We would probably come to a conclusion that this is how we should be evaluating the thesis. So one could be a researcher the thesis of a researcher would be evaluated in a particular way. Whereas in this case, this is it's actually a learning experience, learning process or education process for a reflective practitioner in this particular action space. So, what would be the elements that we would expect that this thesis should tell me that yes, in terms of how she, the point that was being made am I, which somebody said that raised articles in the past about am I involved or not? Am I
lot of discussion.
So now that's, to my mind, for a practitioner, that's one of the things that you if you are actually engaged in transformation practice, that is one of the things that I would expect.
Fundamental.
The whole business about empathy and all that is really is reflected in how I connect
Engage with the community.
how where do I situate myself in that so-called community. So I think that's one dimension that one would look at. So can I, from the thesis, do I get a sense that this person was kind of just oil on water, or was it ethyl alcohol?
Molecular.
Ethyl alcohol.
So that's those are the kinds of things I think we should be looking for.
I was thinking, when Sarvani was telling, one is a student jumping from one topic to another for various other reasons, but in some situations, it might be a struggle to identify a developmental issue for that area. That might be
It's not easy for us.
when somebody is saying that it is migration, and when a person is engaging with another 5 women or 5 men in the villages, one is identifying it's not the issue of the migration I should focus upon, rather something else. So probably in this particular case, we need to value this journey in some manner. This engagement, journey, one is doing something marvelous, that's different, but one is actually putting effort to identify what is the issue where the woman and myself should get engaged in. So that's one area.
This dilemma also has its own value, I think.
Absolutely.
From migration to Narega and then Narega to gardens.
Why am I moving?
Patriarchy. I think this whole dilemma itself is very
Actually,